This is a presentation on Julius Caesar's campaign against the Belgae in 57 BC. This is one of your required readings for week 2. You're supposed to read book 2 out of Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars. You're going to read the second half of that particular book where he goes into detail and narrates how he went about this campaign and the outcome. Now, the reason that we do this is because Julius Caesar, who is essentially new at being a military commander, ends up becoming a great commander, springboarding from this particular campaign, because it is really amazing what he was able to accomplish considering the obstacles and the challenges that he had to face. You can see here, right here, is broken into 4 parts. Talk about part 1, his statecraft, how he formed his strategy, how he ended up dividing the Belgae by co-opting allies down through enticing them into a battle which favored Caesar because he picked the ground, which isolated his real target, and then he went after his real target, which was the Nervii, and then finally he made essentially a international example of the final tribe, which in turn prevented, or was meant to prevent, future results or revolts. And so you can see there in yellow sort of his recipe for winning, which was divide, provoke an attack by individual groups, defeating them in detail, then concentrating on the real threat, and then finally ending it all by making an example of somebody to sort of deter everyone else from revolting. All right, let's take a look at the big. So let's take a look at the big picture, sort of the challenge that faces Julius Caesar in this particular campaign. One of the reasons why he ends up becoming a great commander. Now, Gaul, prior to the Roman conquest, say 57 BC, has a population of around 5 or 6 million. Put that into context. In 1776, when the American colonies revolted against the British Empire, the Americans had a pre-war population of 3 million. So this is roughly double that. Now, they are on the brink of civilization here. They've moved from a tribal Celtic forest environment, tribal, into something where now you have about 800 towns and cities and villages, a rudimentary road network, river traffic, a growing market economy, which has piqued the interest of the Roman Empire because they're looking at this as an economic opportunity. And of course, they have some formidable military powers. Now, the province of Gaul is broken into 3 major ethnicities. You have the Aquitani down in the southwest towards the Bay of Biscay in the Atlantic Ocean and the Pyrenees Mountains. In the center, you have the Celtae. And then in the north and northwest, you have the Belgae, which is the subject of this particular campaign. And then over to the right of your slide, where you see the Rhine River, straddling both sides, but mostly on the east, you have the German tribes, which are wholly hostile to just about everybody. They don't like the Gauls, they don't like the Celts, and they certainly don't like the Romans. And the Germans will always remain a wild card to Julius Caesar throughout his campaign. So how does Julius Caesar get into this fix? Well, it becomes apparent to the Gauls, the Celtic tribes and the Belgic tribes, that Julius Caesar is not going anywhere. And so they decide that they want to destroy Roman power within Gaul completely. And they form an alliance, the Belgae do. One of the tribes decides not to join the alliance. And they have a fort and a city at Bibrax, which you see right there in the middle. They decide, in fact, that they're going to go towards the side of the Romans. Now, this is done deliberately by Julius Caesar. He does this. He finds a weaker tribe, or a tribe that he can kind of peel away from the herd and says, "You're my new friend." And he gets them to sign on to the Romans. Then he essentially leaves them out there as bait. And he wants them to be attacked because not only does it give him a political pretext, he's protecting an ally, but he also has specifically picked that location, so he knows that when he gets to that location, this is a fight that he can win. And it works like a charm. The Belgae alliance comes in towards Bibrax, and they put it to siege, and Julius Caesar marched at a lightning speed, which his guys are very good at, and he defeats the Belgic alliance at the Ain River in short order. And he's really not impressed by their fighting skills. He destroys them really quick, Roman discipline, Roman engineering, These are the tactical advantages that he relies upon. From there, follow the orange line. He begins to move into Belgic territory proper, and he takes on the tribe that he really wants to defeat. And this is the Nervii, and they're the most powerful tribe within the Belgic ethnicity. And he destroys them as well. And then finally, he finishes up his campaign at the city of Namur, where the Aduatuci have decided that they are still holding out. And because they're still holding out, even in the face of two monumental defeats by the other Belgic tribes, Caesar decides to make an example of that. First, he shows them mercy, but he believes that they're going to stab him in the back, which they try to do, and so he completely wipes out the entire Aduatuci tribe and sells them all into slavery. That's the example that he makes. And all this happens in the spring to the fall of 57 BC. And Julius Caesar now, all of a sudden, essentially owns the province of Gaul, which sets him, and as they say, the rest is history. But this is kind of what it is in a nutshell. This is what you're going to be reading about. And you want to be able to focus on the decisions, the information that Caesar has all along this orange trail, and the decisions that he makes, and some of the sticky situations that he gets himself into, and how he gets himself out of it. But those are the four major actions that can kind of help shape how you want to read this. Now, part one, intelligence matters. We talked about some of these already, but here is why he wants to divide and conquer. Okay? He needs to seek an alliance with a once powerful tribe. You see that in bullet 3, which is the Remi. And they hope to gain power by backing Rome. Now, Caesar does this selfishly. He finds somebody who used to be on the ins and are now on the out and says, we're going to be friends. But he knows that by doing this, they're going to become a target. This is all part of Caesar's plan. That way, he has political cover. He looks like he is riding to the help of a friend. This is all about that showmanship, as a great commander often does, because this is going to look good not only on his resume for future consulship, it looks good to the local tribes which he is trying to win over, and then finally he gets the adversary to actually make an impetuous decision, go after what they think is low-hanging fruit, and in fact they end up tying it up with Rome. So that's what he does. He even tells Remy to go ahead and start plundering the neighboring country to get the Belgi to overreact, which they do, as you can see right here in part 2. And there's a very quick slide of the tactical fight that you see. The Belgian army shows up. There's the bridge. The Roman army's holding it. There's the Roman camp. And they battle up and down the river because they hold the bridges. And you can see right here that Caesar's not impressed by the Belgi fighting skills. They're basically a swarm of undisciplined individualists. Okay? And when they find out that, well, the Romans aren't going to leave, nor can they be defeated, the Belgi do what tribesmen do. They get together, they have a council of war, and they decide that they're just going to simply stop fighting and go home. Because this is traditional tribal warfare. You know, and there are rules. When you decide not to fight, everybody goes home. Okay? But Caesar's not interested in rules. And he does something which they do not expect. He pursues them, and he completely annihilates them. Okay? Now, this is a ruthlessness which the Gauls they are not familiar with. And again, bring this forward to our own American experiences in colonial America and in the move towards the West, opening of the West. And there are many tribes in the Native Americans which sort of have the same idea of, we're going to do battle with these new Americans, and then when it doesn't go their way, they say, well, we're just going to go home. I mean, we couldn't defeat you, but, you know, tribal rules, we'll just go home. And they find themselves being pursued by the Americans, who then annihilate them. And again, tribal rules, and then you have Caesar's way of, there are no rules in this traditional warfare, we're fighting to win. And this leaves the Nervii, the strongest opponent, essentially without any key allies. Again, all part of Caesar's plan. So now we have the final decision. And this one almost goes against Caesar. We're now in the late summer of 57, and now the Romans are on their way, and the Nervii know that they've got to come up with some sort of a plan to try to even the odds. So what the Nervii do is they co-opt some of the Belgic tribes that were defeated in the first battle to provide some information on the Roman march. And they're going to ambush the baggage trains. Look at the blue arrow at the top. They're going to ambush the baggage trains and try to split the Roman power. Okay. What Caesar does is he changes up the order of his march, and instead of having legions strung out in and around the baggage train, he leads with 6 veteran legions up front and puts the trains behind them, and then has 2 auxiliary legions, you see there in the slide, the 13th and the 14th, following in behind. Okay, so this sort of defeats the plan of the Nervii just simply by Caesar changing up his order of march. So there's some skirmishes on the march. The forward legions establish a camp. This gives the Romans a place to rally. And then the Nervii attack from all directions. So this is not a set-piece battle. And this is where the personal leadership of Caesar essentially rallies the day. Okay, he moves from legion to legion. Whenever he sees a legion about to break, he moves to that particular location, he stabilizes it, and then he moves to a different one. And then because he's got some good subordinates, which he has developed, who march to the sound of the battle without orders when they sense that Caesar's in trouble, the battle is won. And reportedly, 60,000 Nervii and associate tribesmen are essentially beaten and slaughtered and sold into slavery once again. So this is a great victory for Julius Caesar, and he has essentially crushed the Belgic revolt. There's one thing left to do, and that's loose ends. Okay, now we're moving in late summer into the fall. That should say 57 BC. And the Aduatuci are marching to the relief of the Nervii, but they're too late. So they retreat to the east and they consolidate behind the walled city of Namur. Caesar arrives with his worn army, and what they do is they immediately build massive siege works in classic Roman engineering fashion, which the Aduatuci make fun of because they've not seen this before. And then they go, wow, that's a real problem. So they sue for peace. So Caesar says, throw all your weapons, give all your weapons up, open up the gates, and basically go peaceful. The Aduatuci do so, but it's part of a ruse. Okay, they're going to wait for nightfall, keep some of the weapons that they have hidden, and then they're going to fall on the Roman camp and destroy it because they assume that the Romans will be asleep. Caesar's not fooled. Again, tribal rules and mentality mean that when the sun goes down, we all go to sleep. Okay, they don't have the discipline to maintain 24-hour security, but the Romans do. Caesar's not fooled, and he keeps his army under arms and in their fort and out of the town. The Aduatuci attack at night, and they are absolutely crushed by the Romans. Now Caesar shows no mercy, and he sells the entire population into slavery, thus making an example to the rest of Gaul that if you surrender and you side with us, I can be merciful. And although you may turn in your weapons, you essentially will be absorbed by the greater civilization of the Roman Republic. But if you want to revolt against this, then there is no mercy, and your entire population is essentially forfeit. So this is kind of Caesar's way of doing business. And you can see along this and through his own reading, this heroic nature of Julius Caesar. From the political, strategic side all the way down to rushing from legion to legion when they are beleaguered and essentially saving the day, to finally here at the end where he is magnanimous in trying to get you to sue for peace. And he is utterly ruthless when he feels that he has been betrayed. And is that hero nature which is very, very familiar to an Alexander the Great, which you studied also in this particular week. And I guarantee you, Julius Caesar also studied Alexander the Great. He's kind of channeling his Alexander throughout this entire campaign. So there it is. That's sort of a quick 15-minute overview of Julius Caesar, his campaign of 57 BC, and his defeat of the Belgic conspiracy, as it's called in his particular book, and how he has essentially gained for Rome another province called Gaul.